So, I'm Dr. Craig Keever, and we're beginning or continuing, I should say, our podcast series on roots for health. And I think the first episode or episodes, we kind of went into my story and some basics about, kind of lifestyle medicine and plant-based eating. And I'm going to delve a little bit further into kind of what I would picture as the next phase of the story. When we're talking about nutrition, and you get into studying this at all, you figure out very quickly that there's three macronutrients that our bodies need. And the three macronutrients I'm referring to are protein and fat and carbohydrates. And that's pretty much what our diet consists of when we're talking about things that we need for energy and building body parts and repair of muscles and making hormones and everything it takes for us to be a human. And so you'll see me looking at my phone periodically because I've got my little schedule of events here. So one of the, if not the most, common question that comes out when most plant-based eaters tell somebody that's not a plant-based eater that I eat just plants, the first common question is, where do you get your protein? So I'm going to start talking about protein a little bit at this point. And the short answer to that question is pretty much everywhere. There's protein in just about every plant that you eat. The question is how much, and how much is actually bioavailable, and how do we get the right amounts? So there's zero question that it is very possible, and not only very possible, but likely that you will get all the protein you need from a plant-based diet. But you do have to pay attention. So, as I started to mention a little bit, what are the things that our body needs protein for? And, we need it for muscle building, for body repair, for our immune system, for our hormones. Insulin is really strictly a protein, but insulin is our hormone that controls our blood sugar. So, it affects just about every aspect of our lives that we don't even know is going on, really. So this first section that I'll talk about here is what exactly is protein? And, if you're not a science geek like me, you don't get so excited about this, but it's really interesting to me how proteins are made. And they're made actually directly from our genetic code. It's a long process that I won't go into here, but suffice it to say that our genetic code codes for each amino acid. And what's an amino acid? An amino acid is the building block of the protein. And so by coding for an amino acid and a specific sequence of amino acids, the genetic code will put together a specific chain of amino acids, and the arrangement of those amino acids will determine how that what's called a polypeptide will change shape and form. And then that creates every different kind of protein that there is. Whether it's multiple chains of what are called polypeptides, didn't mean to throw that term out there, but a polypeptide is just a chain of amino acids. There are a total of 20 amino acids in our bodies that make up all the thousands of proteins that we have in our bodies. And what determines that, as I mentioned, is our genetic code and the arrangement of specific amino acids. Out of those 20 amino acids, 9 of them are what we call essential amino acids. What that means is our bodies cannot make those, so we have to actually eat those. The rest of the amino acids, the other 11, can be manufactured by our own bodies. So, as I said before, many plant foods are very rich in amino acids, some richer than others. So the next topic that I'm going to address is...
And is it true with the standard diet with that animals really can't make, they have to have those amino acids that come from plants to be able to make the proteins in their own bodies?
Well, that's an interesting question.
I don't mean to get you off topic.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And I suppose ultimately what is true is that plants ultimately do originally synthesize all these amino acids. And what we make, the 11 amino acids that we can make in our own bodies, what we make that from is things in our diet that we've ingested from plants. So it could be said that proteins are not made by any animal.
Right.
And to some degree, we would be right. But our bodies can take parts from the plant-based diet that we have.
It needs those plants.
But it needs those plants, yes. At some level, we need those plants, yes. So what types of plants account for the bigger parts of protein? Where do we get our protein? And there's a lot of sources. I would say I have about 3 or 4 that are tops in my diet. There's some others that are high in other people's diets that I'm not as fond of, but legumes are probably the biggest source. Any kind of bean, lentils, soy, chickpeas, black beans, tofu, tempeh, edamame, some other sources. There's even protein in whole grains and of course in nuts, and even in vegetables.
Watermelon has protein.
Watermelon has protein. Broccoli has protein. There is a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, I would say tongue-in-cheek sign that compares broccoli to steak. And I don't know exactly what it says, but it compares the amount of protein in, I think, 100 grams of broccoli as being very similar to 100 grams of steak. That's a little bit misleading because to eat the amount of broccoli that you would need to get the amount of protein that you get in a steak, you would eat a huge amount of broccoli that would not be very digestible. Okay? So, while it is a little bit misleading, the point is there is protein in broccoli. We may not be able to access all of that protein, the bioavailability of it, because of the fiber and whatnot in the broccoli. We may not be able to break down all of that and use all of that protein within every piece of broccoli that we eat, but it is there and we will be able to use some of it. So,
because we don't store protein, so
that's right. That's right. And I'll get to that point in a few minutes. So there is a concern in the plant-based world that we get a complete protein. Now, what does that exactly mean? Because of the fact that our bodies have 9 amino acids that are essential, we need to make sure that we get all those 9 amino acids that we can't make on our own. And for instance, if your diet consisted only of rice, and that was your only source of protein, there's a few amino acids of the essential amino acids that you would be missing. All right. Flip side of that, if your only source of protein was beans, same kind of thing. There are some amino acids that are not present in some beans. So a very easy way to remedy that is what we say in the plant-based world, eat the rainbow. If you have a well-rounded diet, and in my example, if you have a serving of beans and a serving of rice, and you mix those, you now have complete protein.
And it's not something to get overworked about as far as how much you're really getting on that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, as kind of my next point of reference, it is pretty important to get the right amount of protein in your diet.
But not something to be stressed over.
Not something to be stressed over. And if you're eating enough calories in your diet, and you're eating a well-rounded diet, 90% or more chance you're going to get all the protein that you need. Okay? But if you're trying to really pay attention to it, our bodies, the vast majority of the human population will get enough protein for all the maintenance and immune function and hormone function if we ingest about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Okay? Now, that's going to vary somewhat depending on your age, depending on your activity level, and depending on what your goals are. All right? Regarding age, younger people, growing people tend to need a little bit more than that because you're using more, you're growing, you're increasing your muscle mass and all of that. So younger people may need closer to 1 gram to 1.1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Older people, as we age, 60s and 70s, we start experiencing a condition called sarcopenia. It's just a normal process of aging. And what that means is we start losing muscle mass as we age. In order to decrease the rate of that happening or prevent it from happening, older people also need a little bit increase in protein, probably up to 1 gram to 1.1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Another factor, if you're into athletics, specifically bodybuilding, and you're trying to build muscles on muscles, you might even need up to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Now, to Amy's question about, or point about, we don't store protein. We have storage mechanisms for 2 of the 3 macronutrients in our body. So if we eat too many carbohydrates, our bodies can create a substance called glycogen, which then helps our body regulate and keep our blood sugar steady. So when a blood sugar starts to drop, we can access our glycogen. It activates and creates more glucose for our blood sugar. We have, for our fat intake, we have an infinite storage supply of fat cells. We can get as fat as we want, okay? So, and I have historically. However, regarding protein, we don't have any place to store our protein. What happens when you eat too much of it? Well, our body uses on a daily basis what it needs to repair, for immune function, all the hormones, everything that I've mentioned. And once we get to the point where, okay, we've used everything, any extra protein in our bodies that we've ingested gets converted to carbohydrates and fat, because that's how we store. So these gym rats, I affectionately refer them to them as, that are convinced that we have to have 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, are just not quite accurate.
It's going somewhere it doesn't need to.
Because what's going to happen is, if they spend 8 hours in the gym, they'll use more protein. That's a given.
Yep.
But not that much. Yep. And then whatever extra they have, it gets converted to carbohydrates and fat. So it just makes no sense to eat extra protein that your body's not going to use.
And it's hard on your liver and your kidneys.
And it's hard on your liver because your liver and kidneys have to work at breaking that down. So protein, by and large, is not a particularly great source for energy for our bodies. And I'll get to that later when I talk about fats and carbohydrates. Protein does have 4 calories of energy per gram of protein that you digest, just like carbohydrates. It's the same as carbohydrates. Fats have 9 grams or 9 calories per gram of fat you eat. So that's just a little side note there. All right, what kinds of things, real life examples of meal ideas to help with getting your protein intake? Chickpea salads. peanut butter on whole grain toast, the quinoa veggie bowl,
Tofu scramble.
tofu scramble. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. Now,
And those proteins to me seem to keep you feeling full for a much longer time.
that's exactly
than
right.
The typical, standard diet does.
Yes, yeah. The proteins will help you maintain that satiation
Breakdown,
feeling. Yeah, very much so. All right. Let's see, looks like I've addressed all of that.
And, for people that don't know how this is, it's like we really just have plant-based our regular recipes that we used to love in the standard diet. So it's not full of salads. It's not full
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my lovely vegan chef here has made it her main goal in life to create all of our historically comfort foods from the standard American diet into a compliant version, and it's been absolutely wonderful. So let's see. Oh, for those that are really interested in kind of tracking your protein intake, because it is very eye-opening.
Yeah.
Probably the best way to do that I've found, there are many apps for it. We've found one called Chronometer. And if you just put in what you eat, you got to put in everything. You got to be honest. But it will calculate all your macronutrients, all your micronutrients. And so you can easily follow.
It's the best by far as far as showing nutrition.
Yeah, it's the best one we've found. Yeah. So that one has worked very, very well. If you're really busy, one of the things that you need is some convenient way to get like snacks in and stuff. And there's very easy ways, like you've made a very nice roasted chickpea, several things like that you can kind of put together. And hummus is a great quick snack. And yeah, so all kinds of things that are readily accessible. And it does take a little more prep time than the standard American diet. And I think that's the difficulty at first.
And it's a different way of cooking. It doesn't have to be overwhelming at first, but I have found if you don't do it in a very tasteful way, you kind of give up before you've really, it takes a little bit to find those recipes that you really love. Exactly. Or you find somebody like us that says, hey, try this. Exactly.
So I suppose in conclusion, regarding proteins, I'd just like to recap and say that, it's easy to maintain appropriate protein levels, on a plant-based diet. I'd say you want to be somewhat cognizant or aware of how much protein you should ideally take in a day. I mean, and using the Chronometer app can be very helpful with that, as well as tracking, or am I getting not only enough protein, but where is it coming from?
Right. Well, and people deal with too family members saying, are you sure this is good and healthy for you? So having a doctor that backs you up, or having a nutritional guideline like that, like we've joked about the guy that said on Game Changers, like, I don't see people that are eating their Kentucky Fried Chicken with, telling me what their nutritional level is.
Exactly.
But people around you are going to ask, and if you feel like, if you're close to them, you might need to know, be able to show that to them. So.
Exactly. Eating plants isn't just enough, it's powerful. Stay nourished, stay inspired.
There you go.